Dear Claudia ji, welcome back to Ayurvedic Healing and Beyond podcast.
Thank you, my dear friend.
It's fantastic to have you back, and I love the conversations that I have with you because you really question certain things that why do you do these things and why, how come, and how it is. And it's always good to talk to a fellow practitioner from different cultures and to understand how the patients work and the challenges that you go through with the background and the cultures of your patients and how we deal with Indian and the different diaspora. It's always there's something always new that I learn after every conversation with you.
I feel the same way. I always look forward to speaking with you. And one reason is that there's this quiet curiosity. It's a curiosity, but it's not a curiosity that attacks a subject.
Hmm.
It's a curiosity that sits back and kind of waits for whatever it is to reveal itself in the conversation. Love
Hmm.
that.
That's exactly what I get from you. It's a mutual feeling. So, how have you been, Florencia?
I've been good. Makar Sankranti was just a couple days ago, and the sun rose with this beam heading straight up vertical out of the sun behind this mountain outside my window. It was just this uh, perfect return of the light kind of moment. And I had a business meeting that I was kind of dreading that
Hmm.
moment, that morning,
Hmm.
because things had been there'd been the way one of the business partners put it is this project has been going to the emergency room every month for a while. We need to chill out. And um and so I was kind of preparing myself for that feeling, and it just went so smoothly, and the feeling of newness was really palpable, and I felt this weight lift. um that there's a lot around that. I mean, one thing I've been working with is how do you have a lot of responsibility but feel freedom within that
Hmm.
responsibility? And part of that for me is understanding that ultimately it's not my responsibility that, the outcome, do the best I can here. And, that's a lifelong thing. But I expected to have to struggle with that part of myself in this meeting and in this day and continue. And there was this newness. And at the end, I thought, oh my gosh, this really is Makar Sankranti. There's a newness here that feels really good. So I'm kind of basking in that and appreciating that. How about you?
Well, I'm restarting my podcast episodes and I'm getting more and more conversations. And, one thing I've always seen after every episode, I realize I learned something new. And I also see that I have to shed some of my past understanding about certain topics. So I've been quite excited to restart this podcasting again. And after the COVID finished, I mean, it's not yet finished, but the borders opened, and then Sitaram got filled up immediately. And then it was difficult for me to balance both the online world and the physical patients. So I was trying to bridge, and now finally I am coming back to my podcasting and getting to know more people. And then set up a studio so I can invite people in present and also, to have the conversation. So I'm quite excited about that journey, restarting it.
Yeah, that's really good. So you feel a good balance between the online and in person now?
So I think both has its benefits and pros and cons. So in the physical world, you are limited to the number of patients that you can just see at a time. But in the online world, you can actually to reach out with your message to much more people, even though the effort is the same. But you don't see the reality of the person with the emotions and the five elements of that person at time. You're just projecting yourself to a blank screen and it's being broadcast. So maybe the you need to make peace with the best of both.
I agree. Social media is vilified, and I think for good reason, a lot of it. And I used to travel around and go to these different places, either small places in other countries or small places in different parts of the US,
Mm-hmm.
and talk about Ayurveda, and that there would be some little heartfelt group of people pouring their heart and spirit into the study of Ayurveda and felt that there was something there, but they felt very isolated and alone.
Mm.
But this was before social media, and I would travel around and realize there you're not alone. There's all these points of light and little groups of sincere souls all around the world, and we're all the same. We're
Mm-hmm.
all heartfelt seekers, and we're not alone. And I think it was hard for people to know that. I think that's a beautiful thing about the internet, is we are able to come together as a global community and support each other and not feel alone in what we're doing. And that's a beautiful part.
Well, we have a digital satsanga that you create. And I'm also curious to know about the satsanga project that you're involved in.
Yeah.
So how has
Yeah.
that
So,
been going?
well, it's getting, it's been 3 years now. There's been a handful of us working on it. And it's interesting, kind of the Western model for starting a business is get your mission statement down and know your business plan. And that's never how I work. And I work and this in early 2020, around the time of the pandemic, number of people reached out and said, "Hey, is anything going on?" Because all of a sudden the whole world had changed. And so they were out of jobs or projects. And I said, well, there's this there's this thing that's come to my heart, and we all kind of coalesced around that. And there was this temptation to go into, well, what is this about? And a mission statement, and to do social media, everybody wants your message to be really clear.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the challenge with this, I think, is that if we're working off of a vision, off of an internal pull, that that vision might have been gifted to us by avidya, by the divine embodiment of a subject, whether it's Ayurveda or Jyotish or whatever somebody is closely connected to. If we've been connected to it for a long time, if we see that body of knowledge as a living divine being and develop that deeper connection with that, we don't know what the agenda is of that of and we're not given, most of us, to know that. We're given a step that, or a, a certain thing. We're given something to work with, I think. And we have to go on faith a lot. We have to turn over our own will and our own idea of where something is going and surrender to jumping off this cliff. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I know something needs to be. These are the people who are showing up to work together. This is the general look of the thing. Where do we go from here? And there was sort of a vision that we coalesced around, and you can find that on the at satsangam.net, not .com, but satsangam.net. If you go to the about page
And
and go
and
to
what is the
vision,
vision? What is the vision that you?
well, what the vision is and what we're doing. It's interesting to try to translate something from almost a different loca of
Mm-hmm.
experience to this five element reality of this
Mm-hmm.
world. So it doesn't, what we're doing doesn't exactly look like the vision, but the vision is the Ganga and the Yamuna,
Mm-hmm.
which is to say also Ida and Pingala, Ida
Mm-hmm.
being associated with Yamuna and Pingala associated with Ganga. And they come together, right, in Allahabad in India, in Prayag, but they come together, and they start in the mountains where all the sages have been meditating. They come down, they join together, this kind of masculine aspect of knowledge, feminine aspect of knowledge, masculine and feminine aspects of reality, um, knowledge, spirit, uh, energetics, and so forth. They come together, and then feed and irrigate all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, how in Ayurveda there's 3 laws of nutrition, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's irrigation,
Yeah.
yeah, kalakapatanyaya and kshiradhadinyaya and so forth, right? But so for anybody who doesn't know those, right, it's irrigation. So this in Ayurveda, right, it applies to the tissues.
Mm-hmm.
So our nutrients are circulating through rasa and rakta dhatu, and each tissue gets to choose out of that circulating rasa and rakta what it needs, and that's transformed into that dhatu. And if we look at that from the point of view of knowledge, knowledge is circulating all around us. And each one of us, right, if we're listening to our innermost essence, we'll be attracted to the knowledge that we need at any given moment.
Mm-hmm.
And we're the pigeon, we're the kapota, we ourselves are what selects from our own internal wisdom and pull and drive what we need. So there's all this circulating knowledge about anything we want out there. So if we tune into our innermost essence and say, what is it that I need? If there's this circulating body of knowledge, we pull it out and have the space to transform that third. So first law is irrigation, second is selectivity, and third is transformation. So it transforms into wisdom in us. So these waters of knowledge come together and they spread and irrigate through all different teachers and students in life. And then we ourselves hopefully become enlightened beings. So it that's the vision. And how that's working is kind of having a vehicle to bring in different teachers who are steeped in their tradition,
Mm-hmm.
um, and give that knowledge out. And what we are, like a short way of saying what we do is we orient students to the context in which their subject exists
Mm-hmm.
in the realm of Indian wisdom traditions, right? And that to me, that's become clearer and clearer that that's what this is about. So we didn't start out with that clear mission statement, but that's what's coming into focus. Another thing that's coming into focus about this is the attention to endangered species. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean that not just in terms of animals and plants, but in terms of knowledge, endangered knowledge that would die off, knowledge that's been cultivated for thousands and thousands of years could go away in a few generations if we don't feed it with our attention. So that's a byproduct of what we're doing. But this business of orienting students to the context in which Indian knowledge systems exists, like that to me it sounds dry, but to me it feels deeply important.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started wondering, like, why is this important? Why? I know it is. I look in my innermost essence, it's important. It's deeply important. Why? And um, I thought about this for a while, and I wrote an article that we can put in the chat for everybody. But um, I think that there's a number of things, but one of the things about this question is that the answer from different people is different. So I brought it to all the advisors of satsangam, who at the time were Shantala Sri Ramaya and Nina Rao and Dr. Svoboda and Fred Smith, and asked other people, and every answer was a little different. But each one of the people who really connect to this project agreed in their innermost essence that yes, this is very important. So before going further, I'm curious to you, does that feel important to you, that we know the context in which something like Ayurveda exists?
You mean if if we don't study, will we know it? Is that what you're asking?
No. Okay. So in Ayurveda, in the West, we understand that Ayurveda is related to different subjects, right?
Yes.
So we'll throw out the term sister sciences. We'll say, oh
Mm.
yeah, yoga's a sister science and Sanskrit's a sister science. But there's actually 14 specific vidyas,
Mm-hmm.
14 sciences, and 64 kalas. 64 is not an exact number, it's a canonical number, but there's lots of arts and crafts and skills in that list that changes over time. And then there's all the different darshanas. Yoga's not a science in this scheme, it's a darshana. It's a way of looking at the world and bodies and how to attain unity and all of that. It's a way of seeing things. And then there's the other darshanas and teachers' texts and traditions. So understanding at least some of the teachers' texts and traditions of India, some of the other vidyas, some of the other kalas. Does that feel important to you?
Of course. I mean, in a way, us doing this podcast is somewhere there is this, even though I never wrote a vision statement as such, but somewhere there is this calling, you're by
Yeah.
there's this inner calling that is gravitating us towards that. And that's why we are having this conversation and we are making sure many people reach out to that. In a way, this podcast is like this Kalay Kapotanyayam. We are
Yeah.
spreading it out, and the people who are interested in it, they'll come and collect the source of wisdom and nourish themselves with that. In a way, in Charaka Samhita, there's a saying, Vidya Tarpanam. Like, Vidya is also a kind of nourishment to people. So when we have the right Vidya, it also is a way of nourishing people. And once there was a person who came and said, the way the modern medicine is growing and how people are ignoring sciences like Ayurveda, it might get become an endangered species and get lost. When that person was saying that, I think Robert Sobodaji was also there, and Soboda just mentioned, I think as long as humanity is alive, Ayurveda will be there. There's nothing to worry about that. But yes,
Yeah.
maybe it is not reaching to the maximum number of people where it is required. Because
Yeah.
when I
Well, I
see
think,
many, mm,
sorry, go ahead.
no, when I see many patients coming in, so why didn't I know about this much earlier? So it is important that we try to reach this to the right people at the right time so that they are able to benefit from this and able to choose what is right for them.
Yeah. I feel thankfully that Ayurveda has been fed a lot of attention
Mm,
in the last um, in my lifetime. I've seen, of course, it in the West, it's blossomed tremendously. And from what I can see in India, when I first got to India, this any student I met in a BAMS program, Bachelor's of Ayurveda and Surgery program, they didn't want to be there. They wanted to be in the allopathic
oh,
school.
absolutely, yes.
They only got into the BAMS program as a consolation prize because they couldn't get into the and even the Ayurvedic programs were competitive, but not as competitive and difficult to get into as the allopathic. And so they the students I met in the BAMS programs, they didn't want to be there, but they were learning enough allopathic medicine that they could practice basically allopathy when they got out. And even as late as 2008, the statistics that I heard from Praful Patel at one point, at that point, were that students who are graduating from the BAMS program, 75%, 70% of students who graduated were practicing allopathic medicine. Students who graduated from Ayurvedic
Yes,
college,
yes.
right? We're practicing allopathic medicine, 20% a combination, and 10% pure Ayurveda. And it seems to me this is changing and that enthusiasm for Ayurveda is changing. So that feels like a very positive thing to me. Are you seeing that
No,
change happen?
but we also need to understand the context of where these people are practicing. Like in Kerala, for example, you would there are I mean there would be there will be like microscopic pockets where Ayurvedic doctor is practicing allopathy, and it'll be very rare. And even if that doctor is practicing, it's out of emergency that it is illegal for him, but he is doing it out of ethical reasons. If there is somebody who needs an injection and he's in deep pain or something, maybe he might intervene with those kind of things. But it is illegal here in Kerala to do that, and it is enforced in a very strict manner. But when you go to North India, especially when there is a lot of poverty in some parts of the country, so many of the concepts of Ayurveda need not work in a place where there's a lot of infectious diseases, where people are in deep pain and all they want is a immediate symptomatic relief. So in such a surrounding, talking about dinacharya and talking about some of the panchakarma need not work, because these are treatments for santarpana vyadis and need not work in apatarpana vyadis. So when it comes to these poverty and problems of infections, the allopathic system is God. So and the many state governments have equipped the Ayurvedic doctors. Please practice allopathy, because they don't have enough allopathic doctors there either. So and you will see, as the quality of the life gets better, more and more people come to Ayurveda because they realize they don't suffer with these infectious diseases or any of those emergency conditions. So that is where Ayurveda comes into practice. So in Kerala, it's not like Kerala is a phenomenally great state compared to others, but the quality of life is quite high compared to the rest of India. And
Right.
the public health initiatives by the government is quite fantastic. And because of that, many of the infectious diseases problems are not so rampant like the rest of India compared to Kerala. So people are more drawn to Ayurveda. First of all, the nature is such that you get a lot of these sources of medications. I mean, all the herbs, and there's a lot of manufacturing units. The lineage is very strong here, and you have a local Vaidya in every village
Right.
before the allopathic system even came into existence and all of that. But of course, thanks to antibiotics, painkillers, and the emergency intervention, that helped our longevity to enhance. But today, as the quality of life increases, the quality of life enhances, more and more people will end up getting drawn to Ayurveda. Now, I was talking to one of the person, and he was saying, usually when I travel, and if you're sitting in the flight, suddenly, by any chance, the next person ends up to have a conversation. And so, what do you do? So, usually I'll say, oh, I'm an Ayurvedic doctor. But are you what? Like, isn't what is like aloe vera? These kind of conversations. Then I have to explain it's a Indic science of medicine, and this is what we practice. Oh, I see. Okay, and what kind of people it helps? So, how is it different from allopathic? This is one question that, being an Ayurvedic doctor, this is a question that you are bound to have, and if you travel to places where they do not know. So I always tell them, allopathy is a answer to humanity's question: how can I prevent death, and how can I avoid pain? And that's what their whole agenda is from day one when they go to school. Everything that they study is about how to prevent death, and how to the foundation is to preventing death, increasing longevity, but the quality of life, they're just learning about it. Because the time when allopathy was designed, Louis Pasteur and all the plague and the epidemics that was happening, the germ theory, it is all about how to give a person more life, more. So that is where it came. So in times when there is more poverty, there is a lot. And as India is also a very growing economy, and we are very fastly growing, that's also why you are seeing more and more Ayurvedic doctors are happy and proud and confident to practice that. And that is why when Ayurvedic doctors go abroad, because okay, you go to Switzerland or Germany, I mean, they don't have these problems of poverty. They have problems of overconsumption, and they don't have much things to deal with, which some northern part of India is going through, and don't have access to potable drinking water. So it's a very different concept that is happening. So definitely, when the quality of life enhances, Ayurveda will become a little more important.
Yeah. So I want to circle back to something in a minute, but one thing I would point out is um, you said, that dinacharya and panchakarma, these are things for santarpana vyadi, but I think dinacharya is very, very useful for apatarpana kind of vyadi as well.
For
It's so
sure. I mean,
stabilizing.
I totally agree with that. Dinacharya is for every human being, for sure.
Yeah.
My point is, I have practiced in really rural parts of Kerala. Like, you will see farmers who may not know how to write and read. So when such a person is coming, he might come with an edema, or he might come with some enlarged prostate issues. And because of that, and he is saying that I took this allopathic medicine and it's not working. And he'll be coming to us as he's fed up with the other system. So to that person, when you try to educate few things, maybe he will take up something, but he's just focused. Can you just tell me how to solve this symptom? He's just
Mm-hmm.
so obsessed with that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a problem that he's dealing with. But when you go to when the patient is in a different setting, like he's having diabetes or he's having high levels of uric acid and living with gout, he's like, or somebody is coming for fertility reasons. You talk about dinacharya, immediately they will catch it up and they realize there's no other way I can recover from that. So the patient's approach and to what is his real need will also have an impact how we can enhance the dinacharya. So, when people come to my retreat, Sitaram, some of the other doctors come and say, because we do at least 2 to 3 vamanas every day for every patient. I mean, among the patients, like we will have 2, 3 vamanas every day early in the morning. So when I have this conversation with other doctors, they ask, how do you manage to make people do the vamana? It's so difficult. Every time I ask my patient, they say, no, never, never. They are like angry, and how can you make me do this thing? So there's a story. You can bring the horse to the pond, but you cannot make it drink. But there's also another story to this. You can bring the horse to the pond and make it thirsty, and it'll end up drinking. Same way, we help them understand if you do this vamana, the benefits that you're going to get is just phenomenal. I mean, patients with asthma, patients with severe migraine issues, even okay, when patient has migraine, there is a high possibility they vomit even without any panchakarma because the body enforces that and it changes. So we explain to them this is the situation. So depending on the background of the rogi, like we talk about pada chadushtaya, like the qualities of the patient. Some patients are very much like, okay, I'm happy to follow what you're saying, I completely surrender. But some patients are half doctors, that makes it even more difficult. The worst patients are when they come as doctors, then whatever we say, then they will go and search Google and they'll come and say, I read that there is a very bad side effects of this. I even had a patient, this was in Trivandrum. He came with alcoholism problem, having a terrible liver issues, and he drinks from morning 6 a.m. And I told him maybe you should try Alcoholic Anonymous because I've heard very good results about Alcoholic Anonymous. There's nothing much I can do here because you really need to come out of it. But doctor, just give me something. I also want to have better energy. Okay, then I prescribed the medicines. First thing he asked me, doctor, does it have any side effects? He's suffering with sometimes they are so obsessed with knowing what is happening, but they don't take you will see patients with diabetes, they are so obsessed with their sugar and their food, but the moment you put them this is what you need to do, they're like questioning, tell me, I'm already struggling with a lot of bad things myself, but I just need to know, I don't want to put anything extra knowingly. That's how their approach is. So sometimes only when the vessel is empty we are able to fill it. So in apatarpana vyadis, they are so stuck with certain things, their survival is their issue. In the other side, survival is not their issue, it is more of how can I bring more discipline into my life, more austerity in my life. So there,
Right.
Ayurveda really, it doesn't mean that Ayurveda doesn't work on the other side, but here it is working more because modern medicine completely missed that bus. So that's where it is helping that part.
Yeah. So, we started about looking at the context, why
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
important to look at the context here, and also what's becoming endangered right now. thankfully, it seems like Ayurveda is not becoming endangered.
No,
It's
not at all. I
it's
don't
being
think so.
fed. However, there's so many other things in India that have served as the context for so long
Hmm.
that are becoming endangered. Like, for example, um, uh, there's this book. I don't know if you met Papita Seth?
Yes, yes, yes. She's in Thrissur right now.
Yes,
She
yes.
did a
So
documentary of. Oh wow, yes, yes.
this is her
I
book,
remember.
In
Yes,
God's Mirror, The Tayams of Malabar. And
she also
she
wrote a book on Guru Ayur.
yes, she wrote a book on Guru Vayur, and she's become a friend of mine. I'm so happy to say I just love her.
Hmm.
And it took her 20 years to write this book, and um, the this tradition, Lakshmanan, who's the main Taya, he carries the deity. He practices Tayam. Um, he she says that she tried to get as much information as she could to kind of keep this alive, but because there's nobody else who knows what he knows, and when
Hmm.
he goes, that's it. He's taking all this incredible knowledge with him. And I think when we're learning Ayurveda, or we're learning, or like Papita ji, learning about Tayam and what's going on, and documenting it and giving it our attention, I don't think we think of that as a profound thing to be doing, but really it is, because
It
if
is a
we don't,
phenomenal
for
thing.
a couple
Yes,
of generations, it goes away. So we're having these conversations. It's keeping it alive. It's keeping it alive. But there's all these things that are fading away. Different kinds of understanding, and Stapatya Veda, and different crafts, different artisans, techniques. I mean, I'm hearing about these things all the time. Somebody recently wrote to me about this man who does these beautiful talismans in actually in maybe even in Malabar. I forget, but I think it's in Kerala, and he makes these beautiful golden ornaments and talismans, and the way he does it is so refined, and there's nobody else coming forward to take it over. And so there's something to me about learning about these things, something to me personally about in my own journey, like learning not Ayurveda specifically, but things like the the context in which Ayurveda exists. That's been very important to me. Can I, like, for example, when I first went to, the second time I went to India, I went for a year, and I was living in Benares, and I was going through the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And in that program, I was a sophomore in college. And in that program, you were supposed to pick uh, some kind of tutorial, and I picked tabla, and I continued studying Hindi with my teacher there. And then the main project was supposed to be 100-page research paper on original research on something. And I fully expected it would be Ayurveda, because I already knew that was what I wanted to do. But I got to Benares, and I was living there, and I had grown up with ev- all this all these Indian knowledge books around, my from my own teachers, my Guruji and his guru, and the Bhagavad Gita, and the Mahabharata, and the Adi Granth. I had all this stuff when I was growing up, and I got to Benares, and I didn't know what was going on. I
hmm.
didn't know what was going on, the festivals that were going on, and what was happening in them. And I kept being on the verge of, I had planned to have this project.
Sorry, I got you cut. So we just repeat it. Yes.
So I got cut off a little bit, but so I was in Benares, and I was supposed to pick this. I had fully expected to pick my project being on Ayurveda,
Ayurveda.
and
Mhm.
right. And I got there, and I didn't know what was going on. So I ended up picking Benares winter Hindu festivals.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought this proposal to the monitors of the program, and there was two of them, and it was met with this silence and disapproval. And one of them said, I still remember exactly what he said. He said, I think I speak for both of us, him and the other monitor, when I say we wish you were taking this seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And I was taking it seriously. And thankfully, because I have a strong Mars in my chart, which is not great for some things, but good for being headstrong, I decided to continue with my plan of studying Benares winter Hindu festivals, and um, and I did, and it on the surface looked like it had nothing to do with Ayurveda,
Mm.
and and that it wasn't serious, but it was so serious because I just and I didn't know why. Again, it was one of those things, checking with the innermost essence. It wasn't a mission statement I set out, it was this, it's not right to jump into Ayurveda. I need to know this ocean in which it exists. So through that choice, I met and was advised by and became dear friends with Om Prakash Sharma, who passed away some 8 years ago or so now. The world's great loss and my personal loss. But it was not until years later that I realized how valuable that was. That was one of the most important critical decisions in my study of Ayurveda, was to study that. Because in ways that I can't fully articulate, but understanding more about the culture in which it came
Mm-hmm.
from helped me understand Ayurveda more deeply. And in part, for example, because the festivals are based on the lunar cycles and the tithis and the nakshatras, and the timings are based on Krishna Paksh or Shukla Paksh, and all these kinds of things and these time cycles. And it gave me this um, understanding of time cycles and how that's integrated and what qualities those present as we're moving through life. And then I studied Jyotish, and of course, that's a huge part of Jyotish. So it enhanced Jyotish, which enhanced the understanding of Ayurveda. And so it gave me this experience of contextual learning that I think many people, even today in India, grow up with.
Mm-hmm.
You grew up naturally knowing these things, not being sat down and taught a lesson and you have a quiz, but it's part of life, and you start seeing these connections between the qualities and properties of the different times of year and the month and the moon, and how that's affecting the mind. And even unconsciously, I think that's playing into um, treatment protocols,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think some
Yes, again, we continue. Yes.
so I think contextual learning itself is becoming endangered.
That's quite true. I think we need more people to pick up some of those knowledge, which are quite endangered today. And recently, I went for a course on marma. In Tamil Nadu, they have this concept called varmam. So there is this gentleman called Mr. Shanmugam. So he documented this entire concept of varmam, and he teaches people how to practice that. And it's a 3 day course. And I was just realizing, if he did not take up that effort to do what he's doing, it would have just become a manuscript in one of those public libraries and got dusted, and we just know it is there. And there are so many things that I learned from that that I'm using in my practice, and I train my junior doctors and my therapists when they are into their practice. And I see the results that it is coming. So, but I have a positive, there is a sense of optimism that, our generation is picking it up and wanting to know more. And there is a side that is asking, how did the world live before the internet? How did the world live before electricity? How was they, dealing with all of that? So I think these are quite important things, and we will revive it back. So I think it's a good thing that the satsangam, like people like you and Ji, I mean, there is a reason why you are starting it because you want to, and then that will take catch momentum and it will continue with that. By the way, have you heard of the sutra in Bhaja Govindam of the word satsangam?
Yes. Yes. I love that.
Yes.
I love that. Yeah. I actually have it right on my computer here.
Satsangatve. I think I studied this when I was
Satsangatve,
in my school.
satsangatvam. Yeah, hang on a second. Satsangatve, nisangatvam, nisangatve,
Nirmoha.
nirmohatvam, nirmohatve, nischalatvam, nischalatve, jivan mukti.
What a profound. I mean, satsangam is the way to enlightenment. That's
Yeah,
the way. It's that one single thread. When you pull it, it'll open up the entire triangle.
that's right. Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know that, so satsangatve, so from satsang, from association with truth, nisangatvam, it
Uh,
leads to detachment. And nisangatve, detachment, will lead to nirmohatvam, the lack of illusion, right?
yes.
Nirmohatve, the lack of illusion, will lead to nischalatvam, uh, unchangeable reality. Nischalatve, jivan mukti, and from that we get liberation. It's
And
beautiful.
also the word satsang also has another meaning where we come together with a group of people who are in the pursuit of truth.
Yeah,
Also, so even in that community, they challenge you to because you are with that community, you start thinking in the right direction. And if
yeah,
you are in the
yeah,
company of people who are having vices, you naturally tend to gravitate towards that feelings. Maybe there is a possibility, maybe not, but
yeah.
there's a high
Oh,
possibility you could get into that.
it's so beautiful. I mean, so absolutely right. Sat truth, Sangha, confluence, right? The confluence of people interested in truth, the confluence of rivers of knowledge coming together. And some of your listeners who are familiar with me know, and maybe you know that my Guruji wrote me when I was 7 years old. He said,
Hmm.
"Be in good company. Good company makes a man great." And I've been reading Philip Lutgendorf's translation of Ramcharitmanas,
Hmm.
and he goes on for pages about the value of good company, um, in such a beautiful way. I think I can find a couple of things right here. Oh, so the effect of immersion in good company, he's saying, is visible at once. The crow turns to cuckoo and the heron to the swan. Let no one wonder at hearing of this, for the power of holy fellowship is no secret. Valmiki, Narada, the pot-born Agastya have each told it with his own tongue. Moving on water, earth, or in the sky, the world's countless beings, sentient or not, whatever they strive for and obtain, wisdom, fame, salvation, glory, goodness, know to be but the grace of good companionship. Worldly wisdom and Veda offer no other recourse. Without good fellowship, there is no discernment, etc., etc. It's so beautiful. And then, uh, yeah, he goes on, pages later. He says, wicked company is loss, good company is gain. So Veda and worldly wisdom affirm, and everyone knows. Dust rises to the sky in contact with wind, but turns to mud when mixed with earthly water. Planets, herbs, wind, water, clothing, through good or bad association, become good things or bad in this world, as discerning people realize, which I think it's so beautiful. So for pages, he's talking about the value of good company. But then he closes out that whole discussion by saying this: knowing all souls in creation, inert or sentient, to be imbued with Ram, I forever bow at their blessed feet, my palms joined in reverence, which
Mm.
is such a beautiful way. Like he's extolling the value of satsang page after page, and then says, and Ram is in everything. So we can bow at the feet of the company of every
Mm.
sentient being.
That's so profound. I think, uh, even though we read about some research from Harvard that sense of community is considered to be the fourth pillar of longevity, but at the same time, a good community makes it far profound and what it can do to you, to your consciousness, to your habits, to your thinking, to your positivity. So that's why the word satsangam, which is a very unique word, only Sanskrit can explain that.
It's true. And it occurs to me another thing, um, that I'm seeing over the years of working with satsangam. One thing is realizing the value of contextual learning. Another thing is keeping things alive that would maybe be starved otherwise. But oh, I just lost my train of thought.
That's
Oh,
okay.
another thing is what I'm seeing now that it, in that I have not seen in my lifetime to the extent that I'm seeing it is a joy in collaboration over competition
Mm.
amongst very knowledgeable pe people around the world steeped in what they've been doing for decades are not just thinking, how can I make a living for myself with this,
Mm.
and cut out other people, and there's this, like, you and I take great joy in these conversations, and I take great joy in these conversations with many other people in and outside of India who have been learning these things for decades. And there's such a joy in collaboration, which is satsang.
Hmm.
So that's, are you finding that?
I love this. This makes me alive.
Yeah, me too. And and then one other thought keeps knocking around in my head, which is in Charaka, and where he talks about pandemics.
Hmm.
He's talking about, and I mean, we don't just have COVID that we're contending with. There's cancer, there's heart disease, there's one pandemic on top of another. We don't know where one ends and another begins, right? And they all play into each other because some of the lifestyle pandemics affect how we react to COVID and so forth, to viral pandemics. Um, but in Charaka, when he's talking about pandemics, and he talks so beautifully about what causes them, um, polluted leaders, polluted earth, polluted water, polluted minds, all that kind of stuff. When he's talking about what we can do about it, he could be talking about Sankalpa building, he could be talking about ashwagandha or whatever, these
Hmm.
strengthening, stabilizing things. But he talks about being in good counsel,
Mm.
putting ourselves in the way of a good counsel and good company. That unless it's our fate to perish in this or any pandemic, the we will be protected by a good company.
That's so true. I think if we put an effort to find the good company and understand what bad company can do to us, I mean, there's a saying: every new friend you choose, you're choosing his habits coming to you. Like new friend is going to give you some new habits, depending on how much time you end up spending.
So this is such an interesting thing, and this is something, there's so many people, when if they know one of the books I've written, they know Balance Your Hormones, Balance Your
Yes.
Life. But the
Hmm.
second one is a smaller one. The first one, the Balance Your Hormones, took 10 years to write, but Four Qualities of Effective Physicians took 1 year to write. But it really stays with me. And one of the explorations in that was exactly this, what you're just talking about. Like, when you hang out with someone and you get their qualities, My guru, like, how does this work in the doctor-patient relationship?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, my guru used to tell a story that this father of a child who had a very good character, let's call him Sunil.
Mm-hmm.
He's Sunil is has this fellow that he plays with. We'll call him Bob, and Bob is a very mischievous character and has some bad qualities. And so Sunil's father says, "Please, I don't want you to play with Bob anymore." And Sunilji says, "Why, father? You know, I understand he's got some bad qualities, but I won't pick them up." And his father says, "See that coal over there? Go pick that up and bring it to me, but make sure that your hand doesn't get blackened when
Mm-hmm.
as you do so." He said,
Mm-hmm.
"Well, how is that possible, father? I can't bring coal without blackening my hand." And he said, "Well, it's the same thing with your friend." So my guru used to tell this story, but little by little, I started thinking, okay, but Bob's father, he's going to want Bob to hang out with Sunil to pick up Sunilji's good qualities,
Mm.
right? So who affects who? Does the person with the good qualities affect the people with the bad qualities, or vice versa? And I started thinking about this, like emotional contagion, right? Is what I call it in the book. Like, who picks up whose? And we know, like, through Western science, like, if I see you doing this to your eyebrow right now, if I'm focusing on you doing that, 100% of the neurons in your brain that are associated with you doing that are firing. But if I'm focused on you, 20% of those same neurons are firing in my
So
head, start
yawning
firing.
is very contagious.
Yeah. So I'm becoming you to
Mm.
20% in a little way. So we're all becoming each other. So I kept thinking, well, like, and this is partly why I think a lot of physicians will talk about, when they're especially in school, people will talk about how to protect yourself from someone else's energy. Someone
Mm.
else has some bad energy or whatever. How do you protect yourself? But this bothered me a little bit because I don't like the hierarchy of doctor patient so much, like, oh, I'm being polluted by my patient.
Mm.
But how do you view that without a hierarchical situation and understand who is going to affect who? Is your patient going to affect you so that at the end of the day you feel tired and sick? Or are you going to affect the patient? Like, who am I to be so pure to affect my patient in this great way? Like, what's happening there? And there was a time I was driving in a taxi with Dr. Svabodaji somewhere in the Himalayas many years ago, and there was a book, some one of us had some tantric book that it wasn't me, it wasn't my book, so somebody else in the taxi, I don't think it was Robert's book, but somebody else in the taxi had this book, and it was some tantra book, and I don't remember what it was. And I was looking through it, and there was this verse that I don't remember well, but it was translated something like, and I'm paraphrasing, which will become clear, um, he with the deepest breath wins. And I thought, what? And it just kind of went into the back of my head, and I put the book aside. But that passage stuck with me, and I wish I knew what book that was, because over time that started to mean more to me, which was, often the word prana is translated as breath into
Mhm.
English. So if we think he with the deepest pranic patterning wins, like, maybe that's more of a way of looking at it. Then this story sort of started to encapsulate this for me, where there was a bunch of this, a friend of mine told me this story about my guru's guru, who is his guru. So he was at the guru's ashram, and he was in the courtyard, and the guru was inside somewhere, and there was a bunch of disciples in the courtyard, and into the courtyard comes this sadhu, and for something set him off, and he got really mad. He
Mhm.
was, my friend said, he was literally frothing at the mouth. He was so angry, and all the other disciples just got paralyzed.
Mhm.
They just, because he with the deepest breath wins. So the sadhu now had the deepest, most impactful pranic patterning in his pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, and it dominated everybody. Then the guru walked out completely unfazed by this and ran his hands down the sadhu. And my friend said it was like he literally drained the rage out of him, and the sadhu became like a puppy dog. So the pranic sort of imprint, the pranic pattern of the pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, anandamaya kosha of the guru, that dominated at that moment. And so I started thinking in the doctor-patient relationship, whoever has the strongest pattern is going to set the tone for that. And if we don't, like I don't really like this duality, hierarchical kind of thing, what do we do about that? And so what I would sort of envision is bringing this third something, bringing the guru, bringing supreme reality, bringing divinity in as a
curtain,
as a
as a
what was the word
curtain,
you
curtain,
yes, a
like
consultant. Yes. So bringing them in and aligning so closely with that third something that third something sets the tone. And maybe I'll set that third something right in myself, but I'm not aligning with my personality. I'm aligning with that divinity, with that supreme reality. And that's what sets the tone. So then then both the patient and the doctor are who affects whom. We're both getting affected by supreme reality.
I think that's exactly the word namaste also has, like divinity in me, appreciates the divinity in you.
Yeah.
Somewhere. I think the person who is more grounded will tend to influence the not so grounded person. But the approach that you're saying, but the moment you have that sankalpa or the intention that the right things come, like we have this sloka, Sahana vavatu sahana punaktu sahaviryam, like let us learn together, let us grow together, let us explore together. The idea that maybe I know something which you don't know, maybe you know something better than. And I'm sure every doctor, when you ask them who's their best teacher, it's always their patients.
Right.
For me, all the books that I've read and classes that I've attended, at the end of the day, it's the patient is the best university and teacher that really matters. So somewhere there's also an influence that you get from the patient, and you also give back. So, like you said, I for me personal, when I sit for a consultation, especially when something very severe case is coming, and sometimes you also go through, oh, how am I going to deal with this kind of problem? That's And they would have gone doctor shopping, and they're coming to you as a last resort. So at that point of time, somewhere I connect with my guru, with my Ishtadevata, guide me so that let the right guidance come to us, so that this person is able to get through that. So that is a very powerful technique that I personally use in my practice, and I also teach this to my students when they come. And this is exactly what you're saying.
Absolutely. I would do the exact same thing. I'm remembering this other disciple of my guru, an incredible disciple. I mean, this man was a meditator. He was a brilliant surgeon in Colombia, and he died a long time ago. But he he would get up at 1 in the morning and just meditate all night, and then go and go to the surgery. And at his eulogy, his son said that his father, when he would go into the operating, uh, into the surgery in the morning, he would look at his hands and say, "Okay, master, what are you going to do with these hands today?" So there was this, and that's what I would do when I would walk into my practice in the morning. I haven't been in practice for a while, but when I would walk in and be like, okay, I would set up, in the US, we have these bowling alleys, right? And the people will bring little children for their birthday parties to the bowling alleys. And they'll set up these bumpers on the gutters, because otherwise every ball that the kid would roll down the aisle would be a gutter ball, and they would never get the pins at the end. But if you set up the bumpers, then it doesn't matter which way the ball goes, it bounces back and forth along the gutters, and finally it hits something and gets something right. And I used to feel like that intention in the morning, that sankalpa in the morning, that turning things over to my guru in the morning was setting up those bumper cars, so that even if I was tired, even if I was forgetful for a moment or two or three or more, that this protection would be set up for the patients and for myself, and it would happen.
I think the Sankalpa is one of the most underrated qualities or practices a person can have. And you actually put a direction. It's like a focus that connect me. Let all my energy focus there so that I am able to draw my energy. It's like they're putting that magnifying glass. So let this divinity come to me. Let the good thoughts, noble thoughts come to me. So it's it's very underrated, I feel. Now we use the Sankalpa mostly in yoga classes. We say, now my Sankalpa for the yoga class. But I think we should take it to every part, even before you enter a flight or you take a car or you're able to do something. That Sankalpa plays such a phenomenal power in everyday ritual. So you ground yourself, you're putting an intention, you're able to do that.
Yeah, I agree, and with one caution,
Hmm.
like, which is, I think if we're relying on our own cleverness to decide what that sankalpa should be,
Hmm.
that can be problematic. Like,
Of course,
you
yes.
know, there's
I
a
totally agree with
there's
that.
a whole movement of like, oh, just envision what you want and you'll get it. And, that's a secret to life, is in the universe, and wealth and power and so forth, is just envision yourself already having this thing and you'll have it, etc. That to me is just the I'm wary of that approach, because I'm wary of my own mind and my own tendency to attachment to um, objects of the senses, and to seduction in terms of power and money, and whatever it is, whatever the seduction is. So, for example, if I set a sankalpa to make $1 million by the time I'm 40, if I'm 20, okay, but is that going to ultimately be good for me, for us, for the world, for the community? Like, I don't know this, and so for me with sankalpa, it's it feels very important to be aligned to my innermost essence and to my guru, and say, the main sankalpa is, thy will be done. Let me live in thy will.
So what I do, in order to not get into the trap of, you know, see, whatever we want is only a result of our memories and our logic and our imagination. But there is a world beyond your imagination. There is a world beyond your logic. So I always, so this is, I don't know where I wrote, oh, but even in Rig Veda, there is this sutra. If you translate it, let noble thoughts come to you from all sides. So maybe when the patient is coming, let us not put the intention, oh, let me cure this patient, whatever it is. Instead, let the right things come to us and let the right journey for this patient also come to that. Or maybe you're not the best doctor for this patient, but maybe you could be the signpost where he could do the next best thing. So let the right thing come to us. So instead of having a sankalpa, I want to earn $1 million. I have a sankalpa. Let my true creativity be expressed where I can
Yeah,
be of contribution. That's a much more profound, bigger, infinite. Earning $1 million, it's again a finite. You're limiting your potential. But when you say, let my creativity be expressed in the best possible way and let people get that contribution and enhance their quality. So that's a way to look at the Sankalpa in a different way, to look at
yeah,
it from an
and
infinite way.
possibly not even my creativity, but thy creativity. Let thy
That we
creativity
take it to
be
another
done.
level.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot in that aspect of Sankalpa there. So do you have any? examples of you practicing your Sankalpa and you saw something happening?
Oh, well,
Just one
there's
thing that
nothing
comes
but
close to your
examples.
head.
Yeah. You first. Why don't you answer that first?
No, not necessarily all the time, but looking at your experience. So I asked first, but let me also think. Maybe let's see who comes first with what they have. Hmm.
You know, I guess what comes to mind is when I was initiated by my guru, part of the initiation agreement was that
Mm-hmm.
I would be true to myself.
I would.
And that's a sankalpa, that I would be true to myself.
True to yourself, yes. Yeah.
And that's a sankalpa.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even remember that that was part of the agreement until many years after I was initiated. A friend of mine, the same friend who was in that courtyard with the frothing sadhu,
Mm-hmm.
he spent very much time with my guru and his guru, and he would deliver the initiation instructions in the U.S.
Mm.
when the guru couldn't be here in person, and so he reread the initiation instructions to some disciples, including me, and that was one of the last things in the instructions is basically to be true to yourself. And I, I think that my life has been an effort to realize that sankalpa.
Mm.
And if the self and the overself, the soul and the oversoul, the drop and the ocean is all the same, then being true to myself is being true to the supreme reality. And so I think that sankalpa has been realized to one degree or another,
Mm-hmm.
minute by minute throughout my life. But it's the one most, I'm making this up right now. Maybe there's something more important, but it seems to me to be
The
the
important so
most.
far. So when I look back, one of the I always wanted to have a place where people come and heal, like which was my calling that led to Sitaram retreat.
Mm.
So I used to go and look for places. So the once I saw a beautiful place near the river, and I saw, my God, this is the place that I want to start. And we found all the things that were coming, and it was aligning, and somehow it didn't work. And I was quite disappointed. But somewhere inside of me, my sankalpa was, if this is the right place, it will happen, or let the right place show up. And that didn't, something happened and it didn't happen. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, after 3 months, some random conversation happened, and I was led to the place where, which is called Sitaram Beach Retreat. So at that time, first time when I went there, I didn't have the feeling that this is the place, but something kept drawing me back. And then later, it is what it is right now. And so to understand, even though you could have a sankalpa and to understand what is your intuition, it takes a lot of patience and trust. And just to understand that trust comes with that feeling that you are destined to do this. When you have that calling, it will come to you. And you need to learn how to listen to that calling. But in order to listen to that calling, you have to come out of your limited thinking. Like, it's not $1 million. It is about how can I contribute more. But the moment you're so fixated on that outcome, it has to be like this. That's when you miss the point. So this is what I learned, and I keep falling back to that trap. I'm not saying I mastered it or something, but I keep falling back into that trap. But then somewhere, okay, this is, I'm just limiting myself to thinking what my monkey mind wants. Let's come out of it and think outside of the box. So this is one of my yet true sankalpa that has happened.
I really love that. If you have a chance to see Netflix is Dave Chappelle, is a comedian.
Mm-hmm.
He has a comedy special called Dreamers. I think it's called Dreamers.
Mm-hmm.
And I just saw it with my husband recently. And at one point towards the end, he says, I am a powerful dreamer. And he's talking about how here he's giving this comedy routine in this place packed with people, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And 20, 40 years ago, I forget how long ago, he had this was where he had first delivered a comedy skit to a few people or something. And he's talking about how much had happened. And he's also talking about, what a rough start it was. And and now he's one of the world's most famous comedians, certainly
Mm-hmm.
one of the US most famous comedians. When he was talking about this, so his sitaram, like it happened after a very long time, and it strikes me like, what's the difference between a sankalpa and a destiny?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you said the word, patience. Like
Mm-hmm.
you've had this sankalpa, but maybe sankalpa sometimes is just a premonition that
Mm-hmm.
there's a destiny that we're living into. And if we can please get our own will and ambition and seduction out of the way and be patient, it will happen at its own pace. And to trust that, I mean, that's something that for me, um, I think we started talking early, like, being in response, finding freedom in responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a sankalpa around sitaram, there's a responsibility around it, there's a destiny around it, the relationship between all of that. Like, can we be in these roles of responsibility to our sankalpa, responsibility to our destiny, responsibility to our responsibility? Can we do that with a freedom, understanding that actually that sankalpa is held by the supreme reality, by our destiny, by the giver of that destiny?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
It's very, I mean, once you get into that vibe, or once you get aligned with that, then you know, okay, this is what, the moment you come out of it and you are in your up and downs of emotions, you know that this is where I need to get back. So, so having that sankalpa that I need to be aligned with the highest divinity that can pass through me, I think that itself is the best sankalpa that anyone can have.
amen.
In a way, the Gayatri mantra is a sankalpa, like let the divinity of the sun, let it pass through me and through every decision and action, let it bring clarity. So it talks about, clarity is the most powerful thing that you can have, because when you have clarity, you're able to say what is yes and no.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you keep going round and round.
yeah, that's actually something that has guided me in my life, more than many, many things, which
Mm.
is waiting for that clarity if it's not there. Because there's the clarity for yes and no, but sometimes there's not a clear yes or no. And in those times, having that patience again to wait until the clarity does arise, because it's not time for action, or
Yeah,
no,
sometimes
actually, it's
not
time.
taking the decision is also a decision, and then the clarity will come and you'll
Yeah,
follow it. I think that was a great conversation, Claudia, as always.
you too, Dr.
And
Vignesh.
and I'll definitely put up the in the show notes about the satsangam so that people are able to follow, and also the work that you do, people can follow. Anything else you would like to share before we close this episode?
Maybe just a 30 seconds of silence.
Perfect. That was wonderful. So thank you, Claudia.
Thank you, Dr. Vignesh.